drive, PlayStation Portable, and even their lineup of robot dogs. That helped them grab a good chunk. Very popular. So the brass at Sony thought, hey,
oh my god.
what if we start selling our own flash memory that people will have to buy to keep using our cameras? I mean, it worked great for the PlayStation. And that's exactly what they did. The memory stick wasn't vastly superior tech media cards that were also common at the time, but they
Hey, what the fuck?
quickly...
What?
stuff are, for some reason, a good idea, even though they tend to fail after a few years. So let's look at 3 next big things that went the way of Betamax. First off, the memory stick from Sony, which, how did they manage to trademark such a generic name? These bad boys first appeared back in 1998 when standalone digital cameras were first starting to catch on, and Sony digital cameras in particular were very popular. So the brass at Sony thought, hey, what if we start selling our own flash memory that people will have to buy to keep using our cameras? I mean, it worked great for the PlayStation. And that's exactly what they did. The memory stick wasn't vastly superior technologically to the more open compact flash or smart media cards that were also common at the time.
Oh my fucking god. I have half gig internet. Is it really this hard? It's fucking 1 in the morning. Look, it's fucking 1 in the morning! We're declining.
But they quickly became popular due
Oh,
to how many people had Sony cameras, and they also worked in Sony's digital Walkman players, the PlayStation Portable, and even their lineup of robot dogs. That helped them grab a good
Oh my god, let's fucking play the video.
That helped them grab a good chunk.
Oh my god, play the video!
Memory dogs. That helped them grab a good chunk of flash memory market share in the early 2000s. Because unlike Memory Stick,
What the fuck was that?
Standard, whose developers pushed
Go
hard
back, bitch.
and portable, and even their lineup of robot dogs. That helped them grab a good chunk of flash memory market share in the early 2000s. But it all changed once the now familiar SD card started market share in the early 2000s. But it all changed.
It froze again.
The now familiar dogs. That helped them grab a good chunk of flash memory market share in the early 2000s. But it all changed.
Oh my god.
It's the now familiar SD card started
Fucking
2000s. But it all changed once the now familiar SD card started popularity. It was an they were driven card started to have it adopted in Gatlier SD portable, and even their line.
Let's just let it play, see what happens.
That helped them grab a good chunk of flash memory market share in the early 2000s. But it all changed once the now familiar SD card started gaining popularity. Because unlike Memory Stick, it was an open stick.
Oh my fucking god. Just play the goddamn video, bitch. Let's just let it load forever, shall we? Let's see what it's doing on our network.
An open standard whose developers
Oh,
hard
here we
to have
go.
adopted
What the
gadgets
fuck?
like other cameras, and the cheaper they were driven.
Hey, what the hell was that?
Especially in smartphones. Open stick adopted in gadgets like other cameras, and especially in smartphones. As those became more mainstream, people bought SD cards to expand their storage because.
Oh, Jesus fuck. It's receiving nothing. Let's see when it jumps.
cat photos, and the higher the volume of SD card sales, the cheaper they were driven, meaning that memory stick was eventually pushed aside. Next up is iOmega's...
What the fuck was that?
Quite different. Eventually pushed aside, and even Sony started selling cameras with SD support in 2010. Next up is iOmega's Zip Disk, which was quite different from the memory stick in that it served a purpose other than just lining someone's pockets. The thing looked like a bigger, chunkier floppy
And
disk,
it's frozen.
which might lead you to think that it was like a floppy that held more data.
Oh my
which
god.
actually is precisely what it was. Instead
And
of
it froze
a
again.
1.44 megabyte disk that spun at 300 RPM, the original zip disk held 100 megabytes and spun at nearly 3,000 RPM for faster data transfers. And we also...
Oh my god. What did you guys do? God, YouTube is just a dumpster fire right now. It's been doing this for about 2 weeks, but I've never had it be this horrible.
So got 250 and 750 megabyte variants later. The zip disk also came out at a pretty sensible time, 1994, when it was becoming very common for people to work with files much larger than what a floppy could hold. But there wasn't a good alternative yet. This led to the zip disk enjoying a burst of popularity through the mid-1990s to the point where quite a few pre-built PCs actually came with internal zip drives, especially Power Macs, helping zip become a very popular format with graphic designers. But despite zip disk's undeniable utility and support for several different interfaces, sales entered a terminal decline
And
in
it's frozen again.
1999. This was when
Oh, no, it
rewritable
isn't.
and rewritable CDs were hitting the mainstream, and blank CDs and burners were much cheaper than the proprietary zip equipment that only one company made. Not to mention the notorious click of death that destroyed your data. Yeah, so they discontinued zip in 2003. But we've got another real throwback for you that's kind of the OG Netflix, right after we thank Zoho CRM for sponsoring this video. Zoho CRM can spot critical and 10% off subscription. Finally, here's something from way...
Oh my god, now what is it doing?
DRM, Cartrivision. This was the original...
What?
movie
It skipped
rental
over.
and having in parallel to modern back that has a surprise... Something from way...
Oh my god. Do not jump. I swear to fucking god, do not jump. Do not jump. What is it downloading? What the hell is it doing? YouTube is just downloading a shit ton.
that has a
Oh my
surprising parallel
God.
to modern DRM.
There we go.
Cartrivision. This was the original movie rental format, and having debuted in 1972, it actually predated both VHS and Betamax. Unfortunately, Cartrivision sucked big time. For starters, you couldn't buy a separate VCR-like player for it and hook it up to your TV. You actually had to buy a combination TV with the player built in, which originally sold for $1,350. That's equivalent to nearly $10,000 today. And yet, you didn't even get a particularly good rental or watching experience. Not only was the video quality notoriously bad due to space constraints on the cartridges, but if you wanted to rent a movie, you had to go to a store and order it from a catalog, then go home and wait for the title that you requested to arrive by mail. What kind of instant gratification is that? It's like a less convenient version of Netflix's original DVD delivery service. These rental cartridges also had an infuriating limitation. You couldn't rewind them. Similar to how modern digital rentals enforce viewing limits, this was a method to ensure that you could only watch the movie one time before you returned it to the store, where they had a special machine that could rewind the tape for the next sucker. Viewer. And to top it all off, the cartridges themselves were notoriously fragile. If you left them someplace that was a little too humid, they would disintegrate in a matter of months. So it's not all that surprising that Cartrivision was discontinued after only 13 months. Are there any other tech failures from yesteryear that you'd like us to explore? Let us know down in the comments, and we may store your choices in a...
Okay. This is not... this is completely the worst I've ever had this happen. Refreshing brings about more issues. It just brings them up in different places than they were when you actually refreshed it. So refreshing the page it just adds new points at which it skips things and all this other crap and just randomly stops. And one time it just buffers, sitting there fully buffering for like 10 seconds straight, which should never, ever, ever happen at 150 megabits. That's just insane. I know it didn't need to do that, and I know it should not have been doing that. And I know that it did not do this a month ago. So YouTube, what is your deal? And why don't you fix your goddamn service? Because this is stupid. This is like you've got chimpanzees coding your shit. I want to know how this happened.
Memory sticks, zip drives, cartridges. For decades, tech companies have...
Let's just try to get through the video.
Proprietary storage formats that only work with their own stuff are, for some reason, a good idea, even though they tend to fail after a few years. So let's look at 3 next big things that went the way of Betamax. First off, the memory stick from Sony, which... how did they manage to trademark such a generic name? These bad boys first appeared back in 1998 when standalone digital cameras were first starting to catch on, and Sony digital cameras in particular were very popular. So the brass at Sony thought, hey, what if we start selling our own flash memory that people will have to buy to keep using our cameras? I mean, it worked great for the PlayStation. And that's exactly what they did. The memory stick wasn't vastly superior technologically to the more open compact flash or smart media cards that were also common at the time, but they quickly became popular due to how many people had Sony cameras, and they also worked in Sony's digital Walkman players, the PlayStation Portable, and even their lineup of robot dogs. That helped them grab a good chunk of flash memory market share in the early 2000s. But it all changed once the now familiar SD card started gaining popularity. Because unlike memory stick, it was
an now this is playing flawlessly.
Developers pushed hard to have it adopted in gadgets like other cameras and especially in smartphones. As those became more mainstream, people bought SD cards to expand their storage because cat photos, and the higher the volume of SD card sales, the cheaper they were driven, meaning that memory stick was eventually pushed aside, and even Sony started selling cameras with SD support in 2010. Next up is iOmega's Zip Disk, which was quite different from the memory stick in that it served a purpose other than just lining someone's pockets. The thing looked like a bigger, chonkier floppy diskette, which might lead you to think that it was like a floppy that held more data, which actually is precisely what it was. Instead of a 1.44 megabyte disk that spun at 300 RPM, the original Zip Disk held 100 megabytes and spun at nearly 3,000 RPM for faster data transfers. And we also got 250 and 750 megabyte variants later. The Zip Disk also came out at a pretty sensible time, 1994, when it was becoming very common for folks to work with files much larger than what a floppy could hold, but there wasn't a good alternative yet. This led to the Zip Disk enjoying a burst of popularity through the mid-1990s to the point where quite a few pre-built PCs actually came with internal zip drives, especially Power Macs, helping Zip become a very popular format with graphic designers. But despite Zip Disk's undeniable utility and support for several different interfaces, sales entered a terminal decline in 1999. This was when recordable and rewritable CDs were hitting the mainstream, and blank CDs and burners were much cheaper than the proprietary Zip equipment that only one company made. Not to mention the notorious click of death that destroyed your data. Yeah, so they discontinued Zip in 2003. But we've got another real throwback for you that's kind of the OG Netflix, right after we thank Zoho CRM for sponsoring this video.
So yeah, this video is playing flawlessly now. I have no idea what their issue is. It would take you about twice as long to get through a video because you have to play through it a couple times for it to play flawlessly, or you can watch it and have to deal with all the stupid buffering and crap that it doesn't need to do. It used to do this on the TV for like only music on YouTube, but now it does it for every single goddamn video. And I don't understand why, and I don't understand how, and I really wish you guys would just fix your shit. So yeah, that's really it. There's gonna be no outro, no intro. Just I'm uploading this raw so that if YouTube really needs to, they can verify that this wasn't edited or anything. All I did was dump it into Resolve, and I'm just gonna cut out a few of the audio tracks because they don't mean anything, and YouTube can't work with them anyway. So I'm just gonna merge all the audio tracks together in Resolve and then export, and that's gonna be all the editing that's done. So YouTube, fix your crap, Jesus, it's not that hard.